Alright, Piss and Vinegar Day 104. High intensity cardio slash abs slash, functional training slash whatever the fuck day. But today I didn't do so much high intensity cardio because it was too hot and I was too tired. And today's relatively optional, or is optional really. Like, most of it is entirely optional. I decide whether I want to do it on the day. The only part that isn't optional is the abs. The abs has to be done because that's, abs are important for aesthetics and strength and just generally very important. So, not to say that high intensity cardio isn't either, but not as much so, more so for health and, endurance or, cardiovascular endurance. So I'm a bit tired, so this voiceover might be a bit lacking, but I didn't do so much of the high intensity cardio. I did some boxing, and a lot of it was cut out because I was boxing for like 20-30 minutes, so I didn't want to just have 20-30 minutes straight of boxing to voiceover. And half of it was cut out anyway because my phone kept overheating because it's very hot in Australia right now. So just kind of cutting up into snippets here just so that I didn't have to show my, extremely lackluster boxing skills for 35 minutes and voiceover of. And then I did some sprints. Sprints are great. I enjoy doing sprints. It might even be the case that I just do a lot more sprinting than anything else on these days. I want to improve my sprints, but also it's just generally very straightforward, easy cardio for me to do, but it's also quite fun. Today's topic, however, is athleticism and misconceptions in athleticism, but more so why high-intensity cardio can be a lot better for people trying to either be a professional athlete, semi-professional, or more likely, if you're listening to this, just a guy that enjoys, boxing or MMA or jiu-jitsu or, maybe like playing amateur rugby or whatever it is. High-intensity training will help a lot for numerous reasons. First is that you will be well recovered. With volume training, a lot of the times, you're in the gym 4, 5, 6 hours a week. The tendons and ligaments are getting broken down a lot more because of all the frequency and volume. Under recovery is already an issue within volume people or people that do volume. But also, you don't have time and you're under recovered, and then you're on top of that you're doing whatever sport it is. If it's like a heavy combat sport or a team sport, but that is like impacts like rugby, it's going to be hard to totally recover from your training plus do rugby. So if you have the ideals of just generally being strong for your sport, or maybe you want to be strong but also you enjoy being muscular and like bodybuilding whilst also doing a sport, whatever it is, doing high intensity training, maybe an hour or two a week versus the 6-7 hours that you do volume training, you'll have a lot more time to then practice your sport, and you'll have a lot more recovery, and you won't have as many nagging injuries that come from the overuse of doing volume training on top of your sport. But on top of that, a lot of training, doesn't necessarily carry over so much to your sport. Now, it depends on the sport and it depends on the training. Obviously, raw strength will make you better at your sport. But there's misconceptions in training where you have sport-specific training, you have power training, things that realistically don't really amount to much, if anything, to actual sports endeavors at all. If anything, they hinder it as to, well, for the reason I just mentioned, which is you're spending too much time in the gym and you're under-recovered. But a lot of it is, first one is power training. The idea that you're building power, your explosive power, by doing, explosive reps on a squat or something. It's not how that works. Your power is determined by your genetics and your type 2 muscle fibers. The only way you can increase your power, in quotes, is by just simply getting stronger. And then your ability to output power will, again, be mostly genetic, but also then, your ability to align your muscles and do the technique that you're trying to do with power efficiently. If you're trying to throw a leg kick with power, a big part of that is just simply going to be your technique. This is why when bodybuilders and powerlifters, hit a bag, including myself, it looks very arm punchy and doesn't look as athletic And even though these guys are realistically far, far stronger than a professional boxer, and on paper that would mean more power, it doesn't equate to that because their technique's not there. They don't know how to align their central nervous system. So really what comes down to power is your central nervous system's efficiency, which then ties into the next point, which is getting strong. Let's say you want to improve your sprint, right? And you see sprinters doing like power cleans, which is a power move in quotes. This is a very technical movement that doesn't necessarily... Obviously, if you can, clean and jerk 200 kilos, you'll have some decent raw strength for sure. You'll be a strong person. But it doesn't carry over as much because it's much more of a skill-based movement. You're learning a skill. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, there's a difference between learnt strength and raw strength. The squat, albeit if you squat 300 kilos, you have some great raw strength, 100%. But a big part of that strength is just the fact that you're neurologically adapted to that squat. This is why strong men aren't as good at the big three as powerlifters, but they have very obviously far more raw strength. So when they get put into machines, their raw output is much, much higher, which would equate to more explosiveness, because at the end of the day, what creates explosiveness is your contractile tissue's ability to contract as hard as possible. And the more you can just train the muscles versus the technique within say a squat or a bench or whatever, where if you can just totally isolate the muscles and get them as strong as possible, that's really what's going to allow you to be as powerful as you can through whatever technique you're learning or whatever sport you're learning. So with high intensity training, the strength that you gain through high intensity is much more honest. It's a bit slower, but it is much more of a muscular strength because you're not doing a bunch of frequency and volume that gives you what is quote unquote artificial strength. Like if you're doing squats 5 times a week, you're not necessarily building the muscular strength or the muscular size that is coinciding with these huge strength increases. It's just the fact that that squat is getting much more neurologically adapted. You're getting much better at the squat. Sport specifically, you're getting good at that thing. Whereas if you're a sprinter, really, you don't want to be so much worrying about getting so good at a squat. You want to be worrying about getting good at a sprint. Your neurological adaptations to the sprint, your ability to align everything within the sprint, technique and central nervous system to output as much force as you possibly can. It only is then assisted by your raw output. But if you're constantly spending time in the gym to increase your strength through skill-based movements, you'll be more likely to be injured and spending less time doing the movements that your sport requires. So tying back to high intensity being better for sports, or can be better for sports, is simply that you're getting more of a true raw strength with no injuries or very minimal injuries. Or I mean, in sports, of course, you're going to get injured. If you're a rugby player or an NFL player and you're running at a 6'5" Tongan guy who weighs 150 kilos and he fucking headbutts your chest, you're gonna break your ribs. Or, if he fucking lands on your knee and hyperextends your knee, your knee's going to explode. That's a freak injury, however. What often causes injuries in sports, or maybe not as much as the freak injuries, but I'd say it's probably more likely, is that you are overtrained, your tendons and ligaments are already in a in a broken down position, let's just say, and then it gets an outside impact or an awkward position or too much torque on the joint, and all of a sudden your knee pops out. All of a sudden a tendon tears, and all of a sudden you can't play for 6 months. Or you might, if you're, unlikely, but if you were listening and you're a professional athlete, it could mean the difference between going on from Division 2 in, say, rugby to Division 1. You'll hear this a lot, these up and coming athletes who have an injury and it stops them. They had all this potential in the world, and all of a sudden they never make it to that next level because they just had this career-ending injury, or an injury in a very pivotal time in their career. And then for you guys most of you guys listening who are just, enjoying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or boxing or whatever, If you're enjoying that, why would you want to potentially get injured or be under recovered, or potentially be less strong in the gym or less aesthetic because you're under recovered, which might not lead to injury in your sport, although it very likely will in a long time frame or a long enough continuum. Why would you want to then hinder your gains for your physique because now you're under recovered due to the boxing and the training? So if you want to be big, strong, and injury-free and really thriving in your sport, I would highly suggest trying high-intensity training. There have been numerous coaches who have come into different sports and started giving their I guess clients or their team or whatever, like strength coaches that go to a team. Like there's one good example actually, and I forgot his name. I can't remember his name, but he's an NFL coach, and it was either college football or straight up Division One, Major League NFL rather. And granted, I don't really follow the NFL, but it was just interesting listening to this guy's results with his team, where they didn't necessarily start. They weren't, having any more plays or having any drastic changes in their game plan. All that changed that allowed them to start succeeding a little bit more was simply that their players weren't getting injured all the time. Their injury rate went down by like over double, or went down by like 100%. Like they went from having 3 or 4 injuries a season, or 3 or 4 major injuries, and 4 or 5 minor injuries, to having very minimal injuries overall. And in a sport, from a professional standpoint, it could just be a matter of attrition, where whichever team keeps their all-stars totally healthy and no nagging injuries, that either takes them off the court or totally or just reduces their output or their performance, could eventually win, just because all the other teams' all-stars or all the other star players are fucking falling off. So these teams weren't necessarily winning grand finals or anything, or in the case of this NFL team, they didn't go on to win the Super Bowl, but their performance went up majorly. And this was very recently. Who knows? Maybe in the coming years there'll be a huge revelation of, because in the NFL specifically, this guy that was talking about it, his high intensity coach, was saying it's one of the biggest injury prone sports there is, because the genetic pool is so high. These dudes are so big, and it's such a rough sport. They're constantly getting injured, but part of this is their training. They're doing all this volume, plus them being on the field every single day practicing. And his team found that their skills actually did improve by quite a demonstrable factor, based off the fact that they could spend more time on the field. Now they're only spending an hour or two a week in the gym. So this is a very extreme example in true professionals probably the most gifted intense sport in the world. Maybe not the most intense sport, but one of the biggest sports in the world with probably the best genetic pool. But if you're listening and you just you like basketball, you like boxing, blah blah blah, this could mean the difference between you going up a division, or maybe going up a belt, or staying consistent enough that you don't get injured, and then you can stay in the dojo or on the field or in the boxing ring or whatever it is more consistently for longer. And even if you don't have any ideals of competing at a high level, if you really enjoy what you're doing, why would you want to potentially get injured? And sometimes people get injured so badly that they can't continue doing the sport they really enjoy. If you fucking seriously decimate your knees when you're playing basketball, I've had clients who have just totally fucked themselves up in sports they enjoy. I had a client recently who had like a shoulder dislocation, and he had a ACL tear, and it wasn't until he switched to high intensity and then also started doing some more rehab stuff like knees over toes, was he able to get back on the court and start playing again, because he would constantly be getting back on the court and just randomly getting injured again, because he was doing all this high volume, high frequency training with another personal trainer. Whereas he switched to, once or twice a week, high intensity, to 20 to 30 minutes a week. And not only did his physique get far better, not only did he lose weight, not only was he enjoying training a hell of a lot more, and all these other benefits that come with high intensity training, his sports performance increased on the court, he was more explosive, and he's less injury prone thus far. He hasn't had an injury. So yeah, basically what I'm getting at is if you enjoy sports and you don't want to get injured, or if you are getting injured all the time, or you have these little nagging injuries, there's a good chance that you're just simply overtrained because you're doing volume. And if you just back that volume down, increase the intensity, you'll have more time to enjoy sports and all other kinds of different things in life. And you'll probably increase your sports performance because you'll stop doing movements that are increasing your, neurological adaptations in the gym, but not so much making you any stronger on the field, or at least not that much stronger. So yeah, that's pretty much it for today. This is a long video because these high intensity cardio, high intensity boxing, fucking, all the different shit I do on this last day, I just kind of bunch of stuff together. And because I'm bunching a bunch of shit together, these videos go for longer. So I might get a bit repetitive and lose some steam narrating these videos, but hopefully that's food for thought, and that will help you with your sports. And if you have kids that want to do sports and they want to improve their capacity, and maybe because kids don't really like training, but what kids can do pretty easily is 20 minutes of high intensity training once a week. And if you tell them, look, this is going to make you less injured and make you better at your sport, you might find that your kid excels among the other kids in the sports. That's how I would have my kids training if they were into sports. That's for sure. Anyway, see you guys tomorrow for more Piss and Vinegar. Bye-bye.